Battlehosts. Be a better gamer, build a better community.
Welcome to Battlehosts, a podcast website dedicated to helping you become a better 40K gamer and to build a better community of players. I'm your host, Mark, and with me tonight is Matt.
Hello, everyone.
This podcast is part 2 of a series of podcasts on the new edition of 40K. With the release of the new edition, we're going to do a bunch of these little special mini episodes. Each one's going to cover a different aspect of the new edition. So in this one, we're going to talk about how to build your army because it is very different than it was in 8th edition. And how you build your army and how it impacts your command points. We'll talk a little bit about unit size considerations, and there's some ideas for, some detachments that you might want to take for your particular armies. There's some flexibility here, but really, I think army construction is one of the big changes to this new edition. It's the one area where people are going to have to change completely how they build their armies. If you've got all your armies, if you've got a Battle Scribe app on your phone with about 100 armies in there, you might as well delete them all because you're going to have to start all over again. So be sure to check out other mini episodes to get caught up on all the changes from 8th edition to this new edition of 40K.
Yeah, and on the outset, I think it's worth saying that this is probably one of the areas of the biggest change from 8th to 9th edition, just kind of reiterating that point. And the changes appear to be positive for the most part. You know, there are some things that are no longer there that some people may not like, but when you look at it from a health of the game standpoint, I would argue that it is for the betterment of the game as a whole. Yeah. And yes, I'm looking at you, Air Wing Detachment. Yeah.
Or the Supreme Command Detachment, where people took as many HQs as they could cram into a list. That's gone too. So those armies that relied on both of those detachments, spoiler alert, they don't exist anymore.
Yes.
So.
And full disclosure, I have taken I have taken Air Wing detachments before, and they're okay. They're okay, but and I've taken Supreme Command detachments before, and they kind of lose sight of kind of what the game is about, of not just taking the best units that are available, and flyers and aircraft are still really strong in this edition, and it got to take something else with them. They got to come as a package deal, or they got to come with the rest of an army. You can't just have a Harlequin force with three Hemlocks just, we're going to follow you guys into battle. That wouldn't happen. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Now, in 8th edition, which, again, will exist for about 2 weeks or so, depending on when you hear this, you took up to 3 detachments, and each one of those detachments gave you a fixed amount of CP. So you were incentivized for taking as many detachments, especially detachments that were worth more CP, like a battalion. So really, to be a Battleforged army was to take as many detachments as you could do. And this had the weird effect of people like, oh, well, if you took this other unit, then you could make this a spearhead detachment. If you took a cheap warlock, for example, which is a 40 point HQ, then you could split all this stuff out and create another detachment out of it. It was weird, and the double battalion was really popular but it was really only good for those armies that had great troop units. You needed 3 to 6 decent troop options to make that work. So that's why we had the Loyal 32, which was that the guard command point farm. We had command point farm detachments, so cheap troops that could fill out and add command points to your army. This was kind of a symptom of this method of army building. And so armies that had cheap and or good troop units had an easier time getting command points, and CP is really what the game runs on right now.
Yeah, and it was unfortunate to see, individuals who, would show up to games or, tournaments, and they would have their custodes, for example, and they really love their custodes, but we all know custodes are a low model count army.
Yep.
Their troops are very expensive. They're very durable, but they're very expensive. To make a battalion with them is just not a points efficient thing. It was not the 8th edition way of building armies was not very helpful to custodes. So you almost had to bring guard with them. You had to bring the Loyal 32 with them in order to be able to get those extra CP so that army could function, because they they had really good stratagems, but those stratagems were expensive.
Yep.
The swooping dive, the tanglefoot grenades, the pregame. Hey, this shield captain has a feel no pain.
Oh yeah.
They spent a lot of command points before the game even started, but their army was not really built to allow them to utilize all the tools that they had. So this change in army building is really going to benefit those small elite armies like Custodes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why every Imperium army had either a detachment of AdMech or a detachment of Guard. Because they had to have it.
They had to.
But now, with the new edition, depending on the point level of the game, everyone starts off with the same amount of CP. So right away, everyone has, at 2,000 points, it's called a Strike Force game, and you get 12 CP. And there's different maximum levels of numbers of detachments you can get. So at a 2,000 point game, you can have 3. So the Strike Force game, which is 2,000, which caps out at 2,000 points, by the way. You can have up to 3 detachments, and you start with 12 CP. Now, the difference is now that every detachment costs you command points. But the core detachments, patrol, battalion, or brigade, if it includes your warlord, it's free. So you're paying for detachments now. So you don't actually want to take as many. You don't want 3 detachments. You can take up to 3, but you really don't want 3 unless there's a way that you can kind of work around it. You want to have a limited amount of detachments, and to get a free detachment requires you to take a patrol, a battalion, or a brigade. So I remember when they were first previewing the new edition, they said, well, troops, you don't have to take troops. Well, you kind of need at least a single troop because you want a patrol at least. You still need a troop, and troops are still useful for objective secured, which, when we talk about the missions, capping objectives is really important. So I would say troops is still very, very important in this edition. But yeah, at this point, every detachment costs you command points.
Yeah, no, they flipped the script, which I feel that was the correct way to go of having to buy detachments rather than getting benefits from having detachments. So because that will innately benefit armies that have cheap units, and it will innately disincentivize those elite armies that have expensive units. Points wise. So I think they did the right flop on this one, and it's like you said, less of an emphasis on troops, but troops are definitely still needed at some level.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Strike Force, by the way, is 1,001 points up to 2,000. So that's the limit. That's the level that I think most tournaments will be hosting events. That's typically what people see. But as far as the actual what each one of these detachments cost, the fortification actually costs you 1 command point. But what's interesting about it is you get under the command benefits, you actually get a +1 command point, thereby making it 0. If the detachment is the same faction as your warlord's detachment.
That is huge too, because if you wanted to bring a fortification in 8th, you had to pay a command point for it, and it took up one of your 3 detachment slots, which was a huge disadvantage as somebody who brought a fortification regularly. It was a huge disincentive to do that. And having something like this, you might see more Orc Mech Boy workshops. You might see more of those awesome Chaos Space Marine, the Noctilith crowns.
Yeah,
you might see some of those. So some of those things are really, really cool, you guys. And having a way of taking it for 0 command point cost is a benefit.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and you're not going to run out of detachments. You're not. It's going to be a third quote unquote detachment, but again, you're trying to limit the detachments you're taking now, not maximize them now. So they're really pushing the idea that a fortification, it doesn't cost you anything to take as far as command points go. You can easily slot it in as long as it's the same faction. We'll see what the points are on fortifications. The rules have never been, well, some of them are, like the Noctilith Crown is really good. Some of them are better than others, but if this Age of Sigmar has army faction-wide fortifications, or I should say terrain pieces that they kind of promote. I can see them kind of doing that with 40K. It'll be interesting to see if the rules become a little better for these things.
Yeah, and I don't know if they've said what happens to the unaligned the unaligned
Oh,
fortifications. Those things probably cost you a CP, like the bastions and the plasma obliterators and the
unless it has
defense lines.
Unless it has an Imperium keyword, that's something we'd have to find out. Like if what happens with that one. But
Mark, we might actually start seeing the webway gates.
I don't know. Aside from except because now all those cool fortifications are basically just display board fodder. So who knows what'll happen there. So the patrol and the auxiliary support detachment is 2 CP. The battalion, the vanguard, the spearhead, the outrider, the super heavy, and the super heavy auxiliary are all 3 CP. The brigade is 4, and the supreme command detachment is 0, but it's changed. So it used to be HQs. Now it's basically 1 HQ that must be your warlord and has to be either a Primarch, a Demon Primarch, or what they call a Supreme Commander unit. And what
a Supreme Commander unit is, we don't know yet.
We do not know. We've never seen it. Yeah, we've never seen anything with the keyword called or a rule that says there's a Supreme Commander. So we can speculate. We can speculate that maybe the Silent King is a Supreme Commander. Will Eldrad be a Supreme Commander? I don't know. But there's the Supreme Commander is a sort of, this is a way that you can take Guilliman without being sort of penalized for it. So if you want to take Guilliman, you can take Guilliman, and he's going to be the warlord of your army. You're forcing him to be the warlord. Like Magnus, you want to take Magnus, he's going to be the warlord. What it does do, though, is it's kind of the end of the Bash Bros. You're not going to see Magnus and Morty unless you're really going to be paying for that.
Will they even be able to make Bash Bros? Because there's these faction requirements now.
Yeah. Oh, that's true, because it's chaos stuff too. But you could take a super heavy auxiliary detachment, which costs you 3 CP to get a Lord of War. But the auxiliary detachments don't give you faction bonuses. So so even just if you want to include a single knight in your army, it actually is kind of expensive. You can take the super heavy detachment where you can get up to 3 to 5 Lord of Wars. Really, you actually, I think there's something came out for knights, which will get refunded this when they did their faction focus. So you can take an all-knight army, but you're kind of disincentivized from taking a single Lord of War in an army now. So, which is unfortunate, because if I want to take Wraith Knights, then I have to take 3 of them to make it really work. I know it's kind of a bummer. I that's the one thing that I'm kind of missing is there's not an easy way without paying CP to take a single Lord of War to kind of include in your army.
Yeah, it's almost like, well, it's not almost like, I mean, reading this, you can tell pretty quickly that they are trying to incentivize single codex builds or something close to that. If you want to mix and match, that's up to you, but you have to pay for it. And in the previous edition, you didn't really have to pay for it. You actually could be, on some points, get all benefit to doing that. But if you want to have, that extra one knight, that one Castellan knight with your guard army, you're going to have to pay a lot of CP to get that.
Yeah,
and that one knight.
And the thing about and like I mentioned, the auxiliary support, the super heavy auxiliary support, and the fortifications, they don't get detachment abilities. So you can take a knight, but it's not going to be like a house knight. You're not going to get the benefits from that. So that's a bit of a bummer. But we talked about there's no air wing. Now all of the basic detachments, the patrol, the battalion, the brigade, the spearhead, the outrider, the vanguard, they all have a 0 to 2 flyer slot. So you will probably see a flyer or 2 in armies. 2 max, really, unless you're taking double, another one of those and paying CP for it. But that's fine. I think it makes sense because it makes the armies feel more like armies at that point.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of kills some army. Well, it kills this army. This change in army build kills a lot of army builds. But orc players I know were having a gaggle of a time with having an air wing detachment of burn Obamas and DACA jets that had those special subcultures that were in their Psychic Awakening book. And you can't really do that anymore, because is it worth replacing an entire detachment's clan ability with a subculture that will only benefit these planes, in reality? And I get it. They'd be disappointed with that, but how silly was it to have, an air wing of, I don't know, I keep going back to Crimson Hunters and Hemlock Wraith Fighters that were like following, that were Eliatok, that were like following around a Drukhari army. I mean, it's just, it was not a positive thing. It created some bad feels. So positive change, I would argue.
Yeah, I think basically now, if you want to take, there are some armies, orcs, Gene Stealer cults that were really built and designed. Well, even Eldar designed to have different factions inside different detachments.
Mm-hmm.
So now I think they don't want you to have multiple factions in an army. Or they don't care. They're just, you're going to pay the CP for it. Now you'll see, I think, to get around that, if you want to have like a single, like say you want to have an Evil Sons, and then what's the other one that orcs typically take?
Death Skulls.
Then you're probably going to take a patrol of one, and then a something of other, like a battalion or a vanguard or whatever. So you'll take that patrol where you put your warlord to get the, so you don't get charged 2 CP, but essentially you're going to be 3 CP down. If you're taking multiple detachments. There's no other way around that now.
Yeah, we're going to see a lot of patrol detachments. Yep. A lot of patrol detachments. And that's okay, because those patrol detachments, while they're cheap, they're really restricted on what units they can take in a patrol detachment. You can only take 1 to 2 HQs. I think it's 1 to 3 troops, maybe 1 to 3 troops, somewhere in there. That we're not going to see. Yeah, we're not just going to see a bunch of, a detachment of 3 Storm Shield, Thunderhammer, Blood Angel Smash Captains.
Nope.
That's
really that doesn't exist anymore.
That's probably not going to exist anymore. So it's going to be interesting to see how army builds kind of shift with all of this. But I mean, even Drukhari players got some good news from GW and their faction focus, that because their army kind of revolves around the patrol detachment of small little raiding parties, maybe a witch cult, maybe a cabal, a Cabalite raiding force. They kind of get some little bonuses, some detachment bonuses with their patrol detachments. And so that leaves the door open that there's going to be cool little army rules that apply specifically for these detachments for specific armies. So it's awesome.
What's funny about that Dark Eldar, that rule has been in place since the book came out, and everyone's like, well, this doesn't make any sense. Why do I want to take a patrol? That's not going to give me any CP. But you wait long enough, the rule actually makes a lot of sense now. There's a section in here about the Battleforged army roster, and you really, really need to look at this. This is something that is really easy to skip, because it looks like an example. It has inside this book, they have a printable page called the Battleforged army roster. And this Battleforged army roster, basically, once a player has selected a Battleforged army, the details of it must be recorded. This is called an army roster. It can be written on a piece of paper or recorded digitally. I really do hope their new app has a way to do this, by the way. I'm really, really hoping that works. But this Battleforged army roster, it almost looks like, and the text is actually pretty small, but it's like, here's all the things to include on the Battleforged army roster. This is meant to, when you come to an event, or even when you play with friends or whatever, I mean, if you're playing against somebody, you're supposed to have this roster done ahead of time. And this roster, it includes your units and war gear, power levels and points, keywords, psychic powers, and warlord traits. It says in here to include the keywords, the psychic powers, and the warlord traits, any stratagems that enable extra warlord traits and relics, any rules like litanies or Catan powers that you sort of have to do before the game starts, the total points limit, the total power level limit, and then the detachments, and then defining your warlord, and then the number of command points. Now, I think it'd be interesting to see if events start to go off of this rule, this right here. What does a Battleforged army roster include? That means that you have to have all your powers picked out. You don't come to the table and say, okay, I'll spend 3 CP to give this person an extra warlord trait and this person an extra relic. Right now, the way the rules say is that's all has to be done before you even start the game.
Yeah, and I mean, I have mixed feelings about this. For one, it takes away some of the flexibility that some armies have, that all armies have at this point.
Yep.
But on the other hand, it reduces confusion about what things these armies have, because I don't know about you. I mean, all this is when I roll up to a table, this is all written down by me by hand and put in a central location to where the opponent can freely see it at any time, but it's interesting that they're requiring this. I don't remember any time that they've went to this detail of what you have to include.
Yeah. I haven't either. I mean, I'm sure I have some ideas, and sometimes for example, if I have a couple psychers, I might have a couple powers I always use, but then there's a couple swing powers there, and at the start of the game, I'll look over the army and I'll say, okay, I'll take this, and this. It's interesting that it's kind of, they want you to do that ahead of time. So that means that, in an event playing 5 rounds or 6 rounds, you're not changing things out. So,
yeah, I get the intent behind it to simplify things, but it has some question marks as far as from a match play standpoint of if this is the best way to go about it. But the A for effort, A for intent on this one.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so let's talk a little about unit sizes. Now, because with this new way of army building, because you don't want to take, you want to limit your amount of detachments. You do not want to take a bunch of you want to take the least amount of detachments possible. And preferably, you take a battalion, a patrol, or a brigade, and then you don't, you get your maximum 12 CP. So if you have to take more than that, then you're giving up CP. So you have, though, in this case, you have limited slots. You don't have all the slots you can. In 8th edition, you're paying for units to fill up slots to get more detachments. Now you kind of have a limit of slots, and so you're trying to limit how many slots you take. So one of the questions is unit sizes. Should you go MSU, or should you more max out your unit sizes? If you go MSU, there's a chance you're going to run out of slots. If your units become larger, then there are some other things to consider, and that is kind of where a lot of people, when this edition came out, or when people are saying, well, horde armies are dead, there's a couple rules that impact quote-unquote horde armies, large numbers of units. And I think the first one is coherency. We talked about that in the last mini episode. If a unit has 6 or more models, you have to be in coherency with 2 other units. So you're going to kind of be clumped together, but coherency makes a difference on how you play the game.
Oh, yeah. As playing somebody who's played a horde army with my orcs, this is kind of a punch in the gut.
A little bit, yeah.
It already takes a long time to move a horde army models wise.
Yep.
I mean, I have movement trays, so it takes me less time than most to move an army. But if you are not using a movement tray and having to make sure that each model is within coherency of 2 other models, as long as that unit as long as the unit's more than 5, that is a huge time sucker.
Yep.
And it also reduces kind of the benefit that we talked about in a previous episode about being able to string out things across, multiple quarters of the board for recon and things like that, for getting line breaker, for getting different objectives, for really for move blocking as well. This really hinders their ability to move, block, and control the board. It's a punch. It's a punch in the gut to hordes. That's for darn sure.
Yeah.
It's one of about 4.
Yeah. The next one is blast weapons, right? So units between 6 and 10 models, the minimum is 3. So if I have a D6 weapon, I roll a 2, it's still a minimum of 3. If it's 11 or more, it's maximum. You don't roll. There are a lot of blast weapons. The page that shows all the blast weapons, there's a lot of them. Some that I'm like, oh wow, that's a blast weapon. Okay. Most things that have a variable number of shots that aren't flamers have become blast weapons. So it's not that blast weapons are just going to be, guard artillery or whatever. It's just about every weapon that had a variable number of shots became a blast weapon in this book.
Yeah. So the Doom Weaver on the Night Spinner, right? Yeah. That bad boy is 2d6 at strength 7, right?
Yep, strength 7, yep.
Strength 7, damage 2, right?
Damage 2, AP 0, except 6s are AP -4, so yeah.
Yeah. Imagine that, like, shooting into, like, a unit of a unit of like 10, 10 guardsmen. I mean, 12 strength 7 shots, even if there's no AP except on 6s, that's going to clear out that squad of 10 guardsmen pretty easily.
Yeah.
I mean, you're hitting on 3s, usually re-rolling because an autarch's right there,
Sure.
or you're guided, re-rolling 1s and 2s, and strength 7 wounding on 2s.
Yep.
And on 6s, it just kills a guardsman outright type thing. So that's devastating to hordes, things like that. And thunderfire cannons, 4d3 shots for a single thunderfire cannon. That's another automatic 12 shots on a small platform like that. It's
yeah. So I would be surprised to see very many units that have 11 or more than 10, unless there's a certain reason why you're needed to do that. But again, but it's the tension. So if I want to get a bunch of cheap bodies, if I take, let's say I take cultists, and let's say instead of taking one blob of 20, I take 2 blobs of 10. Well, those are taking up slots, and those are taking up the slots that I might need for certain things. And slots are going to be more of at a premium for certain armies. So again, that's the trade-off you have to take. Another thing is close combat. So if you have, I'm going back to the Orc Boys or the Gene Stealers, for example, models in engagement range can make a fight. They can fight. Now it's models that are within 1/2 an inch of another model that's engagement range. So what does this mean? This means that before you could sort of move your bases around to get about 3 ranks deep of people fighting against a particular model in the fight phase. Now, basically, you're fighting in 2 ranks.
Yeah. So I mean, it's even. I mean, not to contradict you there, Mark, but it's even a little bit different than that. It's not within 1/2 an inch of a unit that's within engagement range. It's within 1/2 an inch of a unit that is within 1/2 an inch of an enemy model.
Yeah, got it. Yep.
Yeah.
So, even more so.
Yeah, even more so. So it's they have effectively, if you do the simple math on it, they have halved the ability to fight, the engagement, now what they call engagement range. They have reduced that by exactly 50%. Because before it was you are within an inch of a model within an inch.
Yep.
Okay. You're able to, even with 32 mil bases, you could kind of honeycomb it out to get about 3 ranks in. It was tough, but you could do it. Now there's no way that 32 mils are going to 3 ranks. You'll have to be really careful to get 2 ranks in. You're going to have to be really careful. At 25 still might be able to honeycomb. I'm not sure. I haven't done that math, but it has really dealt another blow to hordes, especially close combat hordes.
Yeah. So to go back and even clarify, you're right. So if a model is within an engagement range of another model, it can fight. And that is defined as 1 inch. For a model behind it to fight, it has to be a 1/2 inch within a model that is in itself a 1/2 inch. So that model that originally was in engagement range, when it does its pilot, it has to move within a 1/2 an inch of a model. The model behind it then has to move a 1/2 inch behind it. So you're right. So I feel like 2 ranks. That's really about it. I don't know what kind of weird thing you could possibly do to get more than that, because most base sizes are, 1/2 an inch is really, really limiting. So these 3 rules. These are just several, but the blast weapons, close combat attacks, especially for melee horde units, and then coherency. These are things that really impact what size of units you want. So to get the maximum amount of CP, you want to try to build it in 1 detachment, not try for 3. You're actually limiting units to take, because basically, rather than trying to take units you don't want, rather than taking tax units, you're actually limiting yourself in the units you need to take. So you're actually making difficult choices. You're not buying a bunch of junk. You're like, what do I need to get rid of to fit this? How do I make this work with these slots that I have?
Yeah, and I think we even kind of glazed over that the blast weapons, even if your unit is, not a full, only 10, those blast weapons are still getting a pretty big advantage against you, because the minimum amount of shots that they can have against you is 3. So that's really going to help with like D6 shot weapons if they're shooting at a unit of 6 or more. How often have we did it? Like man, Eldar Shadow Weaver batteries were just, oh man, they were they were kind of my bane with D6 shots. That, how often would you get a 1 or a 2
Oh
when you're
yeah,
shooting
yeah.
like a unit? But the blast keyword now helps with that, because the minimum you can get now is 3 when you're shooting at a unit of from 6 to 10.
Yeah.
So that will reduce how many things you see in that unit size. Not as much as you'll see reductions in the amount of units of 10 of more than 10 models, but you're definitely going to see a lot of units around 5.
Yeah.
A maximum of 5 I think is going to be kind of a sweet spot.
Yeah. Like I've been kind of list building and trying different things out, and I have to have a really darn good reason to go above 5 models in a particular unit, and unless that unit that is what the limit is. But if you want to take more than 3, so let's say that you're going to take a battalion, which is kind of the classic. Let's say that you're playing an army that has the troops that you want to use to take that battalion. If you want to take more than 3 of their, or a fast attack or heavy support, you're going to have to work around. You're going to have to actually take a detachment of Vanguard or Spearhead or what have you. And once you start to take a specialized detachment like that, you're already going to pay CP for it, because you don't get a refund if your warlord is in the Spearhead or the Vanguard or the Outrider. So at that point, you're taking a patrol to put your warlord, and then you're taking this other specialized detachment to go along with it. So then you're at your 2 detachments, and it's going to cost you 2 CP. So you're down to 10 right off the bat.
Yeah, and as we'll get into later, there's ways of regenerating CP in this edition that everybody has access to.
Yeah.
I think every army at this point, off the top of my head, I can't think of any that don't get some sort of form of reclaiming a command point through a relic or something, or a warlord trait. But there's going to be innate abilities to get command points back throughout the game, which will be nice.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking to my Eldar list that I took to LVO. I think I took 2 spearheads in a battalion. I took a bunch of junky troops. Like I took a unit of Storm Guardians just to sit on an objective, because it was a tax, because I wanted to fill out that battalion.
Yeah.
But I filled out. I had 7 heavy supports. Like I went all in on that, because to me, the heavy support for the army I wanted to run, the Night Spinners, the weapons batteries, the Wraith Lords, they just packed it all out. Now I can't run that now. I would have to do a patrol and a spearhead, and even then I'd be limited by the things that I took.
And those detachments, you were really separating out like which of the custom craft worlds you had, right?
Yep,
right.
For sure.
So your ability to do that's going to be really hindered now to basically, having dealer's choice like that. We're like, I'll have an extra detachment with this special, craft. If you want to do that, you're going to have to pay for it now, which is it's definitely part of the benefit of all of it.
Yeah, but it's also, to do that, there's a certain sacrifice there. Now, some armies don't have decent stratagems, or they only have a handful they need. It's probably easier for them to do this than others, but some of them are so CP hungry that they're basically going to take a battalion. And to take a battalion means that I've got either super cheap troops that I don't mind paying the points for, or I have very good troops that I want to take anyways. So, but some armies that have a nice balance around, like Space Marines, right? Their troops are great. Intercessors are amazing. They don't care. They'll take a battalion all day, every day, because their troops are awesome. So, but even then, even like Space Marines were kind of built for a single detachment, sort of single faction kind of focus. It actually benefits them more with this system. So
as you said before, you don't necessarily have to take troops. It's not a requirement anymore. There's definitely benefit to them, because they're usually the cheaper options to hold objectives. And with the smaller board size that we haven't talked about yet, board control is going to be super important in this edition. And troops are one of the most cost-effective ways of doing that. So you need them for that. And of course, objective secured. And a lot of the troops have their own special stratagems, associated with them. Intercessors is a good example. each brand of intercessor has their own special stratagem, whether it's,
Yep.
the auto bolt rifle intercessor, Stalker bolt rifle intercessor. I mean, there's still advantages to taking them, but you're right. Our army building it's not a linchpin as it used to be with the troops.
Yeah. And I think that what this means is that I remember playing against a Genestealer cult army, and the player was explaining, he had 3 detachments of 3 different, cults with 3 different vigilists, blah, blah, blah. And my eyes glossed over. I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about at this point. Cause this is a collection of rules, not a coherent army. And it needed to play that way, but this really does tend to take all that. It really, really disincentivizes you from doing that. So you could do that, but you're going to be down 6 CP basically.
Yeah, and it's with people probably taking an average more of like 2 detachments now instead of pretty much everybody used to take 3. I mean, because it was an advantage. It was not a disincentive.
Yep.
As those Genestealer cold armies and those armies that have 3 different flavors of Space Marines are going to be fewer and far between. It's just going to be an easier army to understand and walk up to the table and play.
For sure. All right, so let's take a little break and let's hear a word from our sponsor, DGT.
We all love Warhammer 40K, but sometimes games just take too long. Using a game timer is the best way to make sure games finish and for both players to get an equal amount of time. Check out the Easy Game Timer from DGT, manufacturers and designers of the timers officially sanctioned by the International Chess Federation. It's simple to set up and customize, and your settings are saved when it's turned off. It's easy to use with a large moving lever for changing turns and a clear digital readout. It's the most affordable and high-quality game timer on the market and is the choice of most 40K events. Whether you want to practice before a big event or you just want to be a better player, the Easy Game Timer from DGT is the perfect game timer for your 40K events. The DGT Easy Game Timer is available from many online retailers. Wholesale pricing is also available for tournament organizers. Check these fine clocks out at dgtnorthamerica.com. Speed up your game and improve your play with the Easy Game Timer from DGT.
All right, and we're back. So some of the stuff that I've been list building and kind of playing around with detachments. And so, for example, AdMech. So I'm building an AdMech army, and I have Call. And AdMech have 3 really great tanks to take the heavy support slot, right?
What? Are you? No. What tanks?
I know.
These tanks.
The Scorpius tanks, right? So I want 3 of them. If I have to take, but if I want to take robots, right, Castellan robots, then that's the 4th heavy support slot. So at that point, then I have to go patrol and spearhead. So there's a trade-off there. Like, am I okay losing 3 CP right off the bat, or do I take 2 tanks and then the robots? So it's been interesting, and I like it a lot because now I'm really trying to determine what I need in an army versus I need to spend points to get this dumb thing to get a 3rd detachment for CP. Yeah. And plus the points are going to go up. We know that. We don't know what they are yet, but as of the time of this recording, but we know the points are going to go up on release. Rumor is between 15 to 20%. So a 1650 to 1700 point army in 8th might be close to what it might be in this new edition. We'll see. Mm-hmm. But really right now I'm building lists at about 1650, 1700 with a single detachment and playing around with that because honestly, I want the CP.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see how they point things when that document comes out, because I wonder if it's going to be like a blanket, 15 to 20%, or if they are going to place extra value in special rules such as fly or character or
blast.
Blast. Yeah. Are they going to place added value? And that's going to be interesting. But it's going to be interesting to see how army lists change. There will still be those holdout for hordes. I imagine there's going to be like, I'm looking behind me right now at my 30, 60, 120 orc boys and my 90 Gretchen. Mm-hmm. And just say like, you know what? I could see why people would dig their heels in and say, nope, I painted these things, I'm going to play them type thing. It'll be interesting to see how much vehicles come into play with all of this, and how armies have to basically simplify quite a little bit based on detachment restrictions now.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to take 2 detachments to have 2 different factions in an army, you're probably going to take a patrol and something else to limit the amount of CP that you have to spend. Because even if you take a patrol, you're still spending 3 CP for whatever, the brigade, the battalion, the vanguard, whatever it is you're doing. So, and I imagine for orcs, especially, that are used to, orcs and Genestealer keep coming to mind, Genestealer cults, because they're the ones that often had multiple detachments. Actually, a lot of armies did. I shouldn't say that. Everything aside from Space Marines relied on it. And in Chaos is a lot of, here's a demon detachment, here's a CSM detachment. It's going to be very, very different when you have to limit those choices and force you to make a single choice. So that, I think, Chaos, even as I think about it, it's going to be very different for them as well.
They are used to bringing a lot of characters, and there is not an easy, cheap way to bring a lot of characters anymore into this game. Though orcs are going to struggle as well because, you got your big mech that you need to bring with the custom force field. You got your big mech, at least one big mech with shock attack gun. You got at least a war boss. You got maybe three weird boys that you want to bring. And it's going to be difficult for some armies that have gotten so used to bringing a ton of characters.
Yeah, you have to jump to a brigade, and even then you only have 5 HQ slots. So some armies, though, I mean, like Harlequins, for example, they have so many characters in the elite slot. Harlequins actually make out pretty well because, I mean, granted, you're only going to be taking a single detachment, but you're going to get 12 CP for a Harlequin army. That I think there's some armies that have characters in the elites that actually could be really, really interesting. But we'll see. Yeah. We'll see. Yeah. But the whole, the chaos list where you had the cabal of Thousand Sons Sorcerers and Demon Princes, 7 or 8 of them, or 6 of them or whatever, in a group surrounded by, a bunch of plague bearers. You can't do that anymore because, first of all, there's not a Supreme Command attachment like that. But at that point, you're pretty CP prohibited. So,
yeah, there's going to be, like you said, it's going to be a game of spreading out the slots that you do have and finding units that are within your current army that will fit those roles that you need them to fit. And instead of, an auto, going to auto takes, that all codexes have a few of them, but there's going to be some more diverse army builds. I
think so.
I'd venture to say, and some more single codex army builds, which is always great to see.
I think so too. Sure. Yeah. All right. Well, that is all we have for army building. Thanks so much for listening to the show. We'd love to hear from our listeners, so feel free to message us on Facebook or email us at thebattlehosts@gmail.com. If you'd like to support us, you can help us in a few different ways. You can tell your friends about us and like us on Facebook. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. You can leave a review on iTunes, which does help to boost our listening audience. Finally, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thebattlehosts. For as little as $1 a month, you can help us with the cost of running the show and staying engaged with the 40K community. So thanks for listening to Battlehosts.
Remember to be a better gamer
and build a better community. Good night.